Good morning, and thank you for joining me today on this, my first real step on the journey to demonstrating my ability to study and research. I will start with where I am and where I position myself. I position myself here on Treaty 6 land. I come to you with respect from the land. A white woman, teacher, researcher, I'm planning to use my epistemological approach to study what it means to have an elder in a public school. There is no doubt that my research is coming from a transformative paradigm through the lenses of axiology and ontology. I intend to conduct my research respecting cultural norms while hoping it will have an impact on the rights of my Indigenous students who, being taught through the lens of their worldview, will no longer need to be assigned individual learning plans, look forward to being at school each day, demonstrate their learning with pride, and recognize the battles that are worth fighting. I intend to recognize the multiple realities that we share as we come together and learn, as well as my place of privilege in this social construct. Although my literature review has only just begun, I am confident that the theme I am seeing emerge, elders play an important role in the education of Indigenous children, will continue. Kent McIntosh and the writers of the 2014 article, Implementing School-Wide Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports to Better Meet the Needs of Indigenous Students, state that elders play an essential role in Indigenous Elders education. Were one of the supports for the students, and the data, in fact, did show a decrease in days of suspension of the students over an 8-year period. It was a quantitative study, and the population was relatively small, being only one school, but the length of the study was very long. Three other articles that I want to point out specific in this area of my literature review. The first, Ron Phillips' article, To Try to Understand Us, Aboriginal Elders' View on Exceptionality. This addresses how elders see themselves as educators, but also how they and Indigenous people see students with exceptionalities. This is important to me because my work also includes thinking about the change from Indigenous students' time spent with elders, and could it potentially lessen the use of individual intervention plans for Indigenous students. Ron Phillips' article opens by simply stating that the Canadian education system is in a mess, and it is particularly true of the current state of special education in First Nations schools. This is interesting that he's focusing on First Nations schools, but he also points out that it's because the First Nations schools are being run by a non-Indigenous organization. The current education system does not reflect, consider, or incorporate an Aboriginal approach to education, particularly when working with students with special needs. This is his point of view, which identifies why this is not working in First Nations school. It is also not working in mainstream urban and public schools, in my opinion. His concerns then, or the concerns that he has outlined, led to a symposium. The symposium was called A Window to Seeing the World Differently. It took place in October of 2005 in Regina, Saskatchewan. Ron was asked specifically to research and use the symposium as the platform to conduct that. It's a qualitative research project. It involves 4 elders and transcribes their responses to 2 questions. The results provide 8 recommendations to teachers and a clear view that there should be no distinction between students with or without disabilities. Paul Hansen then in 2018 wrote an article that's titled Cree Elders' Perspectives on Land-Based Education. This is a case study from the Opaskwayak Cree Nation. He uses the Indigenous research methodology. I mentioned that earlier today. He also says that the elders who carry the traditional knowledge and that they play a significant teaching roles in many Indigenous communities. His data analysis included identifying themes, showing them both in a table and expert excerpts from the Indigenous elders' discussions specific to those themes. So he broke them out separately. The elders were asked their perspective on land-based education in this study, but it directly demonstrates the importance of elders as teachers for my research. Finally, Daryl Manitowabi's 2022 article, When Wuni Zich Wise Practices in Urban Indigenous Education in Northern Ontario, is a direct result of the 2017 UNESCO Global Research Project, Education and Training Systems to Improve the Lives of Indigenous Youth. Daryl took on this study. It is qualitative. He uses 4 focus groups. The participants were volunteers, and following answering 3 research questions, 10 themes emerged and were described. There were none that identified the importance of elders specifically, but Indigenous teachers, support workers, language, and land-based class experiences were identified and aligned with my research and what elders could and would bring to a school. These are only a few of the articles that I've been able to dissect for consideration. The books I intend to finish reading and use are Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a botanist who teaches her students from the garden. She blends science and Indigenous wisdom in this book through story, the way elders teach. Legacy by Susan Matho, who writes about trauma and healing, also through storytelling, and that Indigenous ways of knowing are the path to a better understanding in education and healthcare. I believe this will also add to my research. Finally, Indigenous Methodologies by Margaret Kovach to guide my research. But who knows what else will find its way to me. There is one more article that I would like to highlight for you. Role models can't just be on posters. Remembering Barriers to Indigenous Community Engagement by Brooke Madden, Mark Higgins, and Lisa Korteweg. The research resulted in 4 key barriers that need to be overcome to improve urban or public school education, Indigenous education. The thought and consideration they put into their method and presentation of the data is not just educational, it's moving. With the intention of community engagement in the education process, they used sharing circles that included elders, families, teachers, and support workers with the students. The data is shared as poetic transcription. They are not analyzed because, as the researchers say, the poems speak as the research findings. The researchers chose poetic transcription to center the voices of the Indigenous participants and as an attempt to decolonize their approach to the data dissemination of Indigenous because they are white Euro-Canadian university-based researchers. The researchers quote Glenn's from 1997's poetic transcription is the creation of poem-like compositions from the words of the interviewees. They clearly identify that this data representation is to reflect on what they read and act on improving Indigenous education. From the theme, unilateral decolonization, I'd like to read what they wrote. If you hear the truth, you've just got to change. I wear your clothes and I speak your language. I have a job and I pay taxes just like you. I get them, my children, cable. I get them online. I get them computers. Yay, there's a Walmart here. It's either this or go back to your reserve and become a statistic. If you want kids to know who they are, we need programs. The Canadian government has done a great job of not letting the people know about anything they did to us. Teachers are really lacking that knowledge. To bring this to a close, thank you for listening and your support as I look forward to using the Indigenous methodology with a qualitative approach that will require relationships built on mutual respect and trust to ensure the participants, teachers, students, parents, and administrators who volunteer from the 2 schools who learn with an elder, and of course the elders themselves, to feel safe enough to answer the interview questions I choose. I will do this knowing that my research paradigm is transformative and my beliefs of axiology and ontology ensure respect of the participants, their place in the land, worldview, thoughts, and autonomy. I look forward to collaborating with the participants to ensure the resulting themes allow us to share our success and learning with other schools for their success and learning. Thank you.